Gold prices moved a touch higher on weaker retail sales data, but ultimately still stuck in that key range around 1,200. Suk, what are your thoughts down there? Do you see a move either way?
I have always been bearish on the gold and thought we'd spend a lot of this year rotating around that 1,200 with a lot of volatility. Certainly that has been the case up till now. But even with some of the political gyrations, including the Greece situation and China frustrations with the stock market, we haven't had some of that traditional rally that you would have expected to put the gold above that 1,200 level. This gives me a pause for concern for when things do not turn bullish in bullish times when we get bearish. So I'm slightly bearish, and certainly technically the picture for gold looks terrible.
Because you would think with poor retail sales data that could push out an interest rate hike further down the line. You have issues in Europe, you have issues with China. Gold is typically the safe haven asset. Where are they putting their money? In the dollar?
Certainly a dollar, and still interest rate instruments, and most of all, everything is being funneled into the stock market since we seem to think that all is well again.
Right, on the domestic side for sure. But let's ask this question. Is there a bigger story coming out of copper and even crude for that matter? Because the demand in copper is really weak, and I think that could even tell a bigger picture than what's happening in gold.
Well, a lot of funds that were trading copper and crude oil out of China, certainly decimated in the Chinese stock rout last week, sold the baby in the bathwater out. We saw copper take down to 6-year lows into the 230s, which we haven't seen, like I said, in over 6 years. Crude oil making lows here, and the thoughts are that the major consumer and demand force for those commodities really quite isn't there, with expectations of a still slower growth. Could definitely put the demand side picture on the front burners for copper and crude oil, and that's why we are seeing lower numbers.
So the key concern is that Chinese demand is lower in copper, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So then that could bode to other asset classes as well, because if there's no demand just for the basics, I think that copper would be even a bigger tell than what you're seeing in other markets.
Well, initially we did see a significant sell-off, and then when the Chinese stock market rebounded, we did get a big 20-cent jump back in prices for copper. So, you know, temporarily there will be those spikes in fear times when you can get a good tell that demand is not quite what it used to be. However, the voracious appetite for commodities in general is still going to be there, although not at a significant as it once was. So does that mean that we should see significantly lower prices for copper? Probably not.
Okay, thanks very much, Suk. For The Street in New York, I'm Jill Malandrino.